Hello fellow sim racers, this is a little bonus video for those of you that watched the coaching session with Nils. I just wanted to be able to show you guys a comparison between my original lap before I'd had any coaching and Nils' reference lap that he set, as well as a comparison between my original slow lap and the faster lap that I did after I'd done the coaching. I think it makes for quite an interesting comparison, and I think it's probably interesting to some of you as well. Probably not all though, but after all, that was the point of having this second channel. So let's kick things off with my untrained lap on the right hand side and Nils' reference lap on the left. Already we can see that Nils is holding onto that fifth gear while I'm changing up, which is getting him a small advantage, but where it mostly comes in is him using the full width of the track to start with. But by the time we get to turn 2, that advantage is already lost, and at turn 3 my hesitance getting back on the power and then wanting to hover around, that bad habit that I picked up and was highlighted by Nils in the coaching of just hovering on with a small amount of power on the throttle, has cost me a huge amount by the time we can see on the bridge on the entry to turn 4. Turn 4 is very similar to turn 3 in regards to my approach, as was pointed out in the coaching video, but you can really see how Nils has already forged on maybe 4 or 5 tenths ahead at this stage of the lap. You can see Nils being able to get on the power much earlier out of turn 5. Now through turn 6, 7 and 8 I didn't lose a huge amount of time to Nils, but the advantage had already been gained at this stage in the lap. And of course, if you've watched the coaching video, then you'll know that the end of the lap was another story entirely. Nils is very much able to nail it through the tough Campsa corner, whereas I have to lift on exit a tiny bit to avoid getting a track cut. The hairpin's one of those areas where I actually gained a small amount of time on Nils, but he regained it all at the exit by being able to get on the power earlier, as was pretty common throughout all of the slow corners at this Barcelona lap. You'll note that I tried to take a late apex here, while Nils takes a subtle V-shaped line which is much faster. But it's these next 3 corners where I lose a whole chunk of time, half a second in fact. Too much speed through the right-hander compromises my line into the chicane. I carry too much speed in, and then that delays me being able to get onto the throttle for the 400 or 500 metre run down to the start-finish line. And by that point, Nils has a 1.6, nearly 1.7 second advantage over me. In fact, he's almost returned to the pits before I crossed the start-finish line. And next up we have old me versus new me. On my new lap you'll notice I don't shift up to 6th gear, and that has already locked in a really tiny advantage. I use more of the track on the left and then more of the curb on the inside of turn 1. Already I'm a tenth or so up. Turn 2 I still have to compromise a little bit, but in turn 3 I gain a whole heap of time by just being a bit less cowardly. And you'll see this time manifest itself in the run up to the bridge in a second. Turn 4 I take a tighter line on the way and braking all the way down into the apex, spending less time hovering on the throttle and being able to get on the gas proper much earlier. Turn 5 was a little bit messy on this lap. I have done better, and you can see some of the old habits starting to creep in there, just hovering on the throttle for a tenth or so before I applied it properly. Still some work to do. The chicane at turn 7 and 8, I'm experimenting with taking a bit more curb on the inside, but I'm not sure how much difference that's really making. Whereas with Campsa, again, more committed than my initial lap, and not having to lift off on exit makes a huge difference on the run down to the hairpin. Speaking of which, I braked a couple of meters earlier and tried to turn in a tiny bit later on this lap, which seemed to help, taking slightly less curb. In the meantime, unsettled the car less as well. My line for turn 12 was a little bit better, but not quite the soft V-shape that I was going for, and again you can see that mistake of just putting on the power a little bit too early. I carry less speed into this final complex of corners, don't quite nail the chicane, carry a tiny bit too much into the first left-hander, more time to be found there, but I was still able to get onto the power out of the right-hander nice and early. And that just leaves a nice clean run to the start-finish line and a time of 1 minute 44.2 seconds, a healthy 9 tenths quicker than my initial lap. Or to put it another way, the coaching does seem to have helped.